Hi guys, so these passages are about the truth that is coming out for Montag in these moments. The first for you guys is on page 39 to 43, and this is Clarice talking about how she sees the world and how she's treated in the world. So let's have a quick look at that. So page 39, you should have read it, had a look at some annotations, and now we can add in some more. So first of all, I'm just starting from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. Interestingly here, the lack of punctuation, so all these days are kind of running into each other. And Clarice was there somewhere in the world, and he kind of just goes through he's really seeing her. He's noticing what she's doing. He's noticing that one day it's raining, one day it's sunny, one day she's got freckles on her face or she's sunburnt because of she's been out in the sun all day. He's finally seeing, and I think that that's what this passage is kind of showing us, that whilst Clarice is in the world, he's finally seeing it. And she has this line, I like you and I don't want anything from you. And because we know each other. So it's the first genuine connection that he's had in a very long time. I highlighted this because in a lot of their conversations, she makes him stop. And it's like he's shaking his head, kind of like trying to rattle himself out of the stupor that he was previously in. And down here, she's asked him a question about not having children, and it stopped him in his tracks. And he says, it was a good question. It's been a long time since anyone cared enough to ask a good question. Now contrast that to the way that he responded to her initial questions in the opening scene, where he was getting angry at her, irritable at her for kind of revealing these things and questioning him to the point where he says, have you no respect? Whereas now he accepts her questions because she's opened his mind. And I think that's what I wrote here. He accepts her questions now. He's no longer closed-minded. He's prepared to enter into these conversations. And she makes the point, you always seem so shocked when she talks to him. And he says, I just haven't had the time. And then she mentions his laughter. So we've spoken a few times about laughter, about the fact that he initially is laughing her off. Mildred, Mrs. Bowles, and Mrs. Phelps have that kind of horrible fake laugh when they're anxious. And yet here he's actually laughing, and Clarice says, your laugh sounds much nicer than it did, much more relaxed, and he felt at ease and comfortable. So I think that his laugh is no longer defensive, it's no longer dismissive, it is joyous because he's finally finding joy in the world. And then you've got a bit of insight here about Clarice. I'm antisocial. I don't mix. I'm so strange. But I'm very social indeed. Social to me means talking about things like this. She rattled some chestnuts that had fallen off the tree in the front yard, or talking about how strange the world is. Being with people is nice. But I don't think it's social to get a bunch of people together and then not let them talk, do you? An hour of TV class, an hour of basketball or baseball or running, another hour of transcription, history or painting pictures, and more sports. But do you know we never ask questions, or at least most don't. They just run the answers at you, bing, bing, bing. And us sitting there for 4 more hours of film teacher. That's not social to me at all. It's a lot of funnels and a lot of water poured down the spout and out at the bottom, and them telling us it's wine when it's not. They run us so ragged by the end of the day we can't do anything but go to bed or head for a fun park to bully people around, break window panes in the window smasher place, or wreck cars in the car wrecker place with the big steel ball. This is a really good passage. There's so many quotes in there that you could pluck out and use. But here, she's really just showing that everyone is sleepwalking, and like try and imagine what the classroom looks like. They get, what did she say? Does she say 100 people? No, she just says a bunch of people. So they get all these kids, all these teenagers, and they plonk them in a classroom, and then they press a play button, and there's a teacher on a screen, like now, I suppose, but who's talking at them. They don't get to ask questions. They don't get to interact. They just absorb. That's why we've got this image of the funnel and water's just poured in. But she's saying nothing goes in properly, it just spouts out the bottom. No one's actually absorbing and noticing and interacting with one another. And then they go out and they make them paint, or they make them play basketball. They make them do all these things that kind of like just tire them out for a little bit, but don't actually question them or teach them anything. So she's really highlighting here how empty everyone is, and she's rejecting that, and therefore she's deemed to be antisocial because she's different. And then she talks about how people hurt each other nowadays, and that she's afraid of them and they don't like her because she's afraid. And I think that's interesting that we don't like things that are different. She's pointing out how wrong everything is, and so people don't like her. She says, back in the day, people believed in responsibility. And we can, question whether or not anyone is actually responsible for anything now. And in the scene that we just looked at last time, when Beatty says, the great thing about fire is that you burn away all responsibility. And she's saying that that means that people are kind of careless now, unkind, useless. People don't talk about anything. Oh, they must. No, not anything. They name a lot of cars or clothes or swimming pools mostly, and they say how swell. But they all say the same things, and nobody says anything different from anybody else. Think about this scene when Mrs. Phelps and Mrs. Bowles first enter Guy's house, and they say something like, have you seen that new show? It's fine. Fine. You look beautiful today, Mildred. Beautiful. Everything's so swell. Swell. That's exactly what Clarice is describing. No one actually talks. No one's actually saying anything meaningful. And she's saying here that all art, all music, all museums, everything is abstract. It's just kind of showy colours. There's no substance to anything. So, like an abstract painting that's just like weird colors that are just kind of splashed on, and we say this is anger because it was like, bright red, just stripes all over it. And, but nothing's actually being depicted properly. So that's Clarice kind of revealing the truth of the world in these scenes, that to be different is to be antisocial, and to be deemed antisocial is to be dangerous. Now let's have a look at the next moment of kind of truth when Montag burns the woman. So for you guys, that's on page 48. I'm just going to scroll forward. Okay, and it starts from, it was a flaking 3-story house. Now I want you to contrast throughout this section the violence of the firemen to the calm of the woman. So they're crashing through the front door, they're grabbing her, even though she's not doing anything, she's not trying to escape. They struck a terrible blow upon the head. Oh no, sorry, it's as if they had struck. Ignore that. But then down here, what's his face? Beatty slapped her face with amazing objectivity. Now, we've discussed that before. If you're objective, you have no feeling. And he's just smacked her across the face like it meant nothing. She quotes here, play the man, Master Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out. That's rebellion. She's calling here that she will shine a light on what's going on. She will not be put out by the firemen. This is quite scary, this part here. Move myself out the way. She here says that Mrs. Blake, her neighbour, has ratted her in. And this is the idea of community surveillance, where your neighbours are watching you, your neighbours can dob you in at any moment. So this is the fear. This relates back to McCarthyism and communism, the idea that your neighbours could dob you in as a communist and you could be arrested, you could be tried, you could be kind of persecuted the way that she's been persecuted because her neighbour has decided to dob her in. Later, we see that Montag is a victim of his own wife dobbing him in and her friends. So everyone's always watching you and you need to play ball, like you need to be on board. We've spoken about this scene, but just to remind you, this is the idea that Montag is finally realizing that his activities as a fireman are dangerous. He is hurting people. And he's angry at the woman in a way for making him realize this. She's spoiling the ritual. He's making her feel, he feels like she's accusing him. He feels guilty and he's feeling annoyed at this. She's ruining it, but it's because he's finally understanding what he's doing. Once again, the book is like a bird. It's a white pigeon. Its wings are fluttering. The page is a snowy feather, and the writing on the page is delicate. So this book is this thing of beauty in his hands, and he's finally realizing that. And then he therefore crushes the book to himself with wild devotion. So it's becoming sacred to him. And then this is beautiful imagery. They fell like slaughtered birds, and the woman stood below like a small girl among the bodies. It's just really powerful, these kind of dead things kind of just weighing down around her. Again, it's quite repetitive as we go through these different scenes, but again, we've got the hands and the fact that his hand had done it all. His hand, with a brain of its own, with a conscience and a curiosity in each trembling finger, had turned thief. He's taking the book. And I think here his hands are kind of revealing his hidden desires, aren't they? He wants the book, he wants knowledge, and so later he wants to burn Beatty. They're these hidden desires that he's too scared to actually acknowledge, but they're there. It's pretty close to being the final bit here. These fanatics always try suicide. The pattern's familiar. Like Beatty just expects her to die and like whatever. He's going to let her burn herself to death because he doesn't care anymore. Again, it's just the woman's judgment. She's weighing them quietly. Her quietness is a condemnation. She's reached out with contempt for them all. And so Montag is really feeling in this moment that he is guilty and he's done something wrong, and that this woman she's a martyr. She's sacrificing herself for a greater good. And despite everything, Montag kind of admires that and wants to know what inspires that in her. So these are moments of his awakening where he's realizing, Clarice is telling him what the truth of the world is, and this moment of him destroying the books and killing this woman wakes him up to the violence of what being a fireman truly is. Thanks, guys.